I believe today, because of the pace of change and particularly the impact that technology is having on society, there's going to be so much uncertainty and so much change in the next 5 years that the world needs experts. They need people to make sense of all this chaos and this madness.
Welcome, I'm Ryan Hicks, and this is Modern Business, the podcast to learn from franchise business leaders and explore new business technology. Our community is about sharing knowledge and tools that help us achieve our goals in business and beyond. Thanks for being here, and welcome to Modern Business. Modern Business episode number 18. We're going to listen in on a call with Gay Gaddis, who's the president of T3. T3 is the Austin, Texas-based agency. In my opinion, they're killing it. They do work for many brands that you've probably heard of, including 7-Eleven, Focus Brands, which owns Carvel's, Slotsky's, McAllister's, and many others. And this is a company I just really like. They I'll give you a couple of examples of why they're very human. They're focused on technology and they help brands do good work, but they're very human. They have a work happy hour every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. They have a program called T3 and Under, which I don't want to spoil. You'll hear about it in the interview. Another example, I was about to record this little intro, so I looked over at their website, and one of the quotes from employees was under a section called Dogs of T3. And let's just say they work K9 to 5 as well. The founder of the company is Gay Gaddis, and she's one of the largest woman-owned advertising agencies in the U.S. She founded the company in 1989, and I think she knows a thing or two about empowerment because she just recently wrote a book called Cowgirl Power, where she teaches other women, and I guess men can read it too, but she teaches women how to develop power and not be afraid to take it when it comes your way. Topics that Ben and I explore in this episode include how he sees brands innovating and use modern technology and modern branding to gain an edge, how brands focus on experience first and begin to define an entire market for their community, and how to leverage social data, what to think about AI, many different topics. And he gave two really interesting book recommendations as well. Both are related to AI and VR and what the future might hold. But let's go ahead and kick it off. We'll cut over to the interview, or really just the chat between Ben and I. Hope you enjoy. Cheers. Ben, welcome to the Modern Business Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Excited to chat with you today.
Yes, so good to have you. Let's jump right in. Tell me, how did the company start?
Well, it's a pretty interesting story. So T3 is a family business. And so the story starts back in 1989. So my stepmom, Gay Gaddis, was working at an ad agency here in Austin, Texas, and got really frustrated because every time their clients came to them with a problem, the answer was a television spot. Didn't matter what the problem was, didn't matter what they were trying to solve, that was the answer. And so the agency actually did pretty well, but she thought there was a better way to go about it. So she put together a business plan to start more of a consulting arm and really try to solve client business problems. And funny enough, she presented it to the agency leadership, the president in particular, and he didn't support it. He said, that's not what we do. We make TV spots. Don't show that to anybody. And so she's a pretty fiery lady from Texas. So she just quit with no real plan. She had $16,000 in her IRA, rolled it over, and started T3. And that was back in 1989, and grown a little bit since then. So about to celebrate our 29th anniversary, and up to about 220 people now across 4 offices in the U.S.
That's excellent growth. She also wrote a book, didn't she? Isn't she either wrote one or about to publish one? What was the name of it?
Yeah, it came out last week. It's called Cowgirl Power, and it's it's a story of her journey as she started T3 and really her life. But it also talks about her thoughts on power and what power really means. And, a lot of people think of power as this sort of top-down thing that you have over people. And what she believes is that women in particular have different ways of going about gaining power. And the power is all about really giving you options to make decisions that are going to better your life. And so she's written an entire book about it. And it's pretty great. I recommend everybody go out and take a look at it. It's on Amazon and all the usual places.
Excellent. Cowgirl Power. I will be buying it. Tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get into the business?
Well, so I come from, a motley crew, but it's a family of entrepreneurs. So my dad was in the business, like I mentioned. Gay, my stepmom founded the business. My mom has a media buying firm that they're about to celebrate their 40th anniversary. So, I come from a family where everybody has started their own business in some way. And so I kind of grew up around the dinner table, just hearing them talk about brands and hearing them talk about how they go about solving business challenges, communication challenges. And it's just always been something that I've been interested in. So when I got out of college, I thought, well, I'll just go work for the family business. That makes a lot of sense. And luckily enough, Lee and Gay weren't having any of it. They didn't think I had the skills or the credibility or any of that to join the business. And the best thing they did was make me go out and really learn on my own. So I went out I was out at Dell answering the phones in the sales position, worked for a printing company, and then got mixed up in the advertising world and really got into the technology space. So I was doing a lot of search marketing and then got into the mobile space very early on, and that really became my passion. And since then, I've really been focused on emerging technologies, and luckily enough, about 9 years ago, I was able to come back to T3, build out some new capabilities there, and then the rest is kind of history.
You mentioned emerging technologies. That's a good segue to talk a little bit about how you see brands leveraging technology and innovating. We have this huge movement you mentioned earlier coming from the traditional answer is run a commercial or get on TV. Well, now we have this whole generation that's coming up that has essentially not even cut the cord because they were never even on it. And they have all these digital platforms, and there's all this, there's a lot going on. So how do you see brands leveraging technology and innovating? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's the most exciting time to be in brand because brand has a totally different meaning. Brand used to be about what you could convince people that you stood for. It was positioning. You could position your way into people's minds. And if you look at the brands of today, like Amazon and Uber, that people point to as brands who have really changed the game, most of them don't actually do that much advertising. And what they do instead is they focus on the experience first. They solve a problem. And then once they've done that, they gather a following of people who not only can they not get an experience anywhere else, but they look to that experience to define an entire market and to really define all the experiences they have in their life. And so what I think we're seeing now is that brands, regardless of category or how long they've been around, are starting to realize that you have to focus on the experience first. That's the only way to build long-term relationships. And so instead of like 5 or 6, 10 years ago, they're focusing in on shiny technologies and new buzzwordy type things. Why I'm excited is because I see more and more brands start to think about technology as a set of tools that can, across multiple channels, across multiple experiences, deliver on what a customer is looking for. And they're really starting to think about themselves as a set of product experiences. And so the best brands that I see are the ones I saw a case study the other day or some product announcement. Google, they bought Nest and they've got a new doorbell coming out. And what they've been able to do is they've been able to piece together a lot of different pieces of technology. But I think the smartest thing that they're doing is on the new Nest Cam doorbell. If somebody comes up to your doorbell, they can actually go through all of your Google photos and anybody who's tagged, do facial recognition, then determine who's at your door, and then they can actually tell you that your mom's at the door or somebody that you don't know. I just think it's really cool that they're able to pull together a set of different experiences and data that create something that nobody else can.
That is fascinating. There's a couple of things I want to unpack there. I think first and foremost, focus on the experience first is very wise. You mentioned basically technology being a set of tools that can deliver what a customer's looking for. And something I've actually heard is that technology and for example, like the social mediums and the social avenues basically just exposes who you are as a brand or as a person, etc. And there's I see a lot of brands using what I call UGC, user-generated content, and basically that just exposing you and that basically marketing itself. In the past, you would position and brand yourself, and now consumers and customers are kind of defining that, and it is experience first. How have you seen folks using, and do your clients use user-generated content via pictures, reviews, etc.? Do you see user-generated content more believable when people are making decisions for purchasing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's no question that people trust each other people, more than they trust brands. And it's something that every brand has to realize, whether it's a Yelp or any type of review platform. That's where people go first. And so brands have to not only understand that, but they have to embrace it. There's a great company here in Austin called Bazaar Voice who has really pioneered the idea of review marketing. But on top of just product reviews, what happens in social is really a reflection of not how people think about the brand, but how they actually use it. And so when somebody takes a picture of their meal or they open a product and they snap a picture of it and they post it, what they're really showing is how they feel when they're interacting with that product. And that is more genuine and probably more important to somebody else who's thinking about buying that product than any type of communication that a brand could put together or beautiful TV spot. So the brands who are doing it really well are not only encouraging that, but you would be surprised how many people don't take advantage of great content that's out there. So are you doing listening? Are you really following and understanding how people are talking about your brand, responding to them, encouraging them to share those experiences and reviews? And that's one of the first places we tell people to start. We go in and we do an audit of not just their social experience, but how people are talking about the category in general. And you would be surprised how often we find that there's gold that they're not utilizing.
Very wise words. How just the simple act of asking people to share will beget more sharing, and thus a lot more of the things that you want. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing. I think I saw recently that you're doing some work with Focus Brands. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing with Focus.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were lucky enough to just pick up all 6 of the Focus Brands. And most people don't know Focus Brands, but they know the brands underneath that portfolio, like Auntie Anne's, Carvel, Cinnabon, Moe's, McAllister's, some fantastic food brands. And what we're helping them with is really rethinking how they use channels like social, like digital media, but more importantly, how they create an experience that people are loyal to. And when we think about the restaurant category, there's so much disruption going on right now. You've got the delivery services like Uber Eats. You've got the ability for grocery to be delivered through things like Instacart. And then you've got just amazing restaurants that are popping up everywhere, whether they're mom and pops or big multi-unit chains. And so they're getting squeezed from every side. And we firmly believe that the only way to stand out is to provide a better experience, whether you want to do that in the store, in the 4 walls, you want to do it in your home, or you want to do some combination of the two. And so what we're focused on with them is helping them really define what their future state experience is, and then make it easy to take those brands and get them into the hands of the people who already love them.
Excellent. What top advice do you have for brands or a business owner that need to start to define that experience that you just mentioned?
So
what's a good starting point?
We talked about a little bit earlier, and the word data is thrown around, and it's up there with the top buzzwords: data science, augmented reality, voice-based interface. I think those are the three buzzwords of 2018. But data is the most overlooked and underutilized tool that marketers have available to them today. And so when you specifically think about things like social and when you think about experience, there's so much data that is out there and readily available that you could use. It's publicly available, and most marketers aren't using that. And so what we're seeing our clients be successful around is to try to take data, things that happen in the social environment, and try to not only understand who their customers are, not only understand how they're using and buying their products, but try to take that data outside of one channel and influence other channels. So what can you do learning from social that's going to have application inside your store? Or how could social data that people are essentially just giving to you for free, streaming up to you in real time to make your website or your mobile app experience better? How could it improve or determine what your product roadmap looks like? So I think those are areas that we always tell our clients to start with: is focus on the data, make sure that you're really listening, and then the second piece is, are you really participating in the conversation, and are you participating in your product experience the same way a consumer would? And I'm very surprised often when we go in and talk to somebody and we tell them something about the fact that their checkout flow is broken, or that how many steps it takes to actually purchase or buy their product, and they don't know that. It's because they live in a world where they've been thinking about a million different things as it relates to their product, but they're not actually going through and experiencing it like a consumer who doesn't know anything about your brand would. So use the data and then make sure that you actually live and breathe your product like a consumer does.
Very good advice. Focus on the data, listen, participate the same way that a client would. I want to shift over and talk a little more about your company. I noticed that you have an initiative called the T3 Initiative. Tell us about the T3 and under thing that you guys do, because I think that's a very neat thing. It shows how you take care of your own and how you take care of your employees.
Yeah, it's been a great program that actually started back in 1995. And so at the very early stages of the company, there were 4 women who were going to go out on maternity leave at the same time. And what Gay realized is that these women were vital to the organization. And unfortunately, not only were they going to go out, but there was a potential that they might not come back, because that moment after you have the baby and come back into the working environment is sometimes the hardest. And so she said, you know what, just bring the babies back with you. Her lawyers told her she was crazy. There's all sorts of insurance challenges. And she said, screw it, we're just going to do it. It's more important to have these people here than to worry about all the things that could go wrong. And so they came back, and it was really successful. And more moms and dads brought their babies, and we just had our 90th baby go through the program. Our first baby who went through the program was an intern back at T3 last year. Her mom is still with us in the accounting department, and so it's literally come full circle. We say we're growing talent for the next generation of T3, and it's today. There's programs. I don't think there's programs that are exactly like this, but what I think we've been able to prove is that it was the right thing to do in 1995, and everybody kind of thought we were crazy for doing it. It's still the right thing to do today, and it's not perfect. We've learned a lot, and there's a lot of things that we can continue to improve on. But being able to understand what your employees value the most and then craft programs around them builds really loyal advocates inside the organization. And some of our people who are not with T3 anymore, some of their fondest memories are the fact that someone was able to bring their baby. And you would be amazed. People people chip in. They come and they'll grab the baby if a mom or dad has a meeting, and it's kind of an amazing environment. It's a very, very cool program.
That's excellent. Do you find yourself, as you're consulting clients on the execution of building a better experience and delivering their product or their service in a better way, do you find yourself kind of consulting on that side of the thing in terms of, it sounds like you guys have drilled it in terms of just taking care of your folks and understanding where their values lie. I think there's a lot to be said about that. So like as a part of you mentoring folks in terms of business development as an agency, do you find yourself consulting on management practices as well, or is it just something that you do yourself?
No, we do. And when we think, so we have a brand studio, and one of the things that we help our clients with is really understanding what their brand stands for, what's their purpose, positioning, but how does that come together in a set of experiences that not only your customers understand and love, but that is true for your employees and true for your organization. And so I honestly believe the biggest challenge of branding work, and the best branding merges the experience and the brand. It starts with whether or not your employees believe it, and then whether or not your organization can actually pull it off. And the organizations that we work with, big organizations, big franchise organizations like 7-Eleven or Pizza Hut or somebody like UPS who has 435,000 employees and in all these different countries, if they don't actually listen to their employees and craft a brand and an experience that's really based in what's true today, but also aspirational enough that people want to get on board, then those folks aren't going to believe it and they don't deliver on it. And luckily, I think that our clients, they understand that. And it's a challenge as a large organization. It's a challenge as a small organization. And I think the key there is it's never done. And so you have to continue to evolve that. And that's why programs like T3 and Under, which has changed so many times since 1995, they're important, but it's more important that you really understand what values your employees have and what's most valuable to them.
Love it. I think that it didn't even start as a program. It started with some folks just saying, you have a baby, why not just bring it to the office? Ben, do you have any mentors, and can you share a valuable lesson maybe that you've learned along your career journey?
That's a great question. I mean, I do have some mentors. I don't know that I'm in a position to where I've done anything to say that they would even want to be associated with me. I think that some of them would still say I got a long way to go, but I've got a couple that some are more formal and some are informal. Probably, my biggest influence is a guy named Brad Batiste, who was my boss when I was at Omnicom. And I had come into this mobile agency, and this was back in the day when text messaging was the newest, coolest thing. And we were doing, it felt like we were, sending rockets to the moon. It was so cutting edge, and we had so much fun. But we were really pitching a new technology. And Brad came into the organization, and I honestly thought I had everything figured out. And I'd go in and I'd talk to clients about how they should use this new technology. And what I was missing is I didn't really understand strategy. I didn't know what that meant. And I didn't know how to communicate how technology is just essentially a tool that can help people solve a broader business need. And what he was able to do, and I think what most great mentors are able to do, is without making you feel uncomfortable, make you feel uncomfortable. They can almost get you to take a step back, and it's not like an out-of-body experience, but you can see what you're doing in a different light, and you start to understand that even though you think you're doing something the right way, there's another way to do it, and they help you go through that. And what he was able to help me do is just communicate the benefits of what we were trying to sell versus the technology or the thing. And the second that I learned that, the conversations changed, the success rate of what we were selling, but really the value that we provided to our clients went through the roof. And I never forgot that. And I think that has been something that has helped me immensely through my career. So, he's a fantastic mentor. And then we've got our chief creative officer. There's a guy at T3 named Jay Storr. He's been with us for almost 20 years now. And the thing that Jay has done, and I don't know that he would say he's my formal mentor, but I've learned more from him than probably anybody else. And the thing that he has been able to do and teach me is that if you think about every new problem as an opportunity to reinvent yourself and to learn, that you can always stay ahead. And Jay he's the smartest guy. He's the fastest to not just understand and dissect a problem, but to really understand it in a way that other people don't, because he goes so deep. And he's just really pushed me to be more strategic and just been a fantastic mentor.
Phenomenal. Those are very, very powerful words. Problems as opportunities to reinvent yourself. That's good. What do you are you a reader? Do you have a favorite book?
I am. I do. And I say I'm a reader.
By the way, if someone asked me what's my favorite book, I'd probably give a list of two. Like, I probably couldn't even answer the own question that I just asked. But if you had to boil it down, what would be your favorite book?
So my wife would argue and say that I'm not a reader, I'm a listener. So I am a rabid Audible fan. And one of the problems with Audible is that you don't actually see the book cover. So I'll be halfway through a book and not even remember the title. But there's so many books that I've read this year that are that were amazing. But there's two in particular. The first one is called Life 3.0, and it talks about what life in a world of AI looks like. And man, it is a mind-blowing. It's an amazing. The author did a fantastic job of telling part narrative of what the future could look like, and then part research paper, almost dissertation on how AI is going to come to life and how we have to treat it in a safe and really responsible way. But I read that book and it blew my mind. It just completely changed the way that I think about AI, which I think will be probably the biggest technological leap in the next 10 to 15 years. And it's a bit challenging to get through, but I recommend everybody go through that. And then you read that, and then something that's a bit more fun and about to be a movie, Ready Player One, which if you haven't read is kind of a dystopian future where everybody lives in more of a virtual reality world because the world's kind of gone to hell. Just amazing. If you grew up in the 80s, you'll love it just because of some of the cultural reference. But I think those two things together, one probably more realistic, a bit scary, and applicable today, and then Ready Player One, which is just what could happen, but just a gripping novel, and I'm excited to see that come out actually on film.
Nice. So they're making it into a film. Ready Player One.
Yeah, I think Spielberg's doing it. So nice. It's going to be, the trailer came out. It'll be crazy.
By the way, as a multitasker, I've already purchased Life 3.0, and I'm about to get Ready Player One. So Amazon.
Well, let me know what you think. Life 3.0, the first two chapters are just riveting. And then it gets a little tough, but stick through it because it's just mind-blowing.
You said it gets a little tough, stick through it. We have a couple of minutes left here. Tell me about something, a career challenge or some type of challenge that you've had that you had to do just that. You had to stick through it in your career. What was it, and how did you overcome?
Oh, man, that's a great question. Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I've found, so I took on the president role probably been about a year and a half now. And I've learned a lot as I moved from being part of the organization to really having to lead, or having the opportunity to lead the organization. But I think, the most challenging thing that I've faced at T3 is a couple of years ago, we brought on we brought in a new person, and this person was going to help us out in a couple of key departments. And honestly, we didn't know if there was going to be a culture fit there. And I said, I'm not sure just culturally if he lines up and how the organization is going to respond, but he's talented, he's a good guy. We should just take a chance on it. And I think in my gut, I knew it was going to be challenging, and I probably knew it wasn't going to work. And it's not because he was a bad guy. It's just that we have a pretty defined culture, and we know when things fit or they don't. And it didn't work out, but I didn't want to admit that I'd made a mistake because I'd championed this, and this was really my hire. And so I waited too long. And then finally we just had to have a conversation and say, you know what, this isn't the best fit. And so I think the biggest challenge was just stepping up and saying, hey, I did this. I was the one who made this mistake. And I should have remedied it a lot sooner, and it would have been better and more fair to everybody. But here's what we're going to do moving forward. And if I look now, everyone in that situation is in a better place. And so the learning that I had there is that sometimes you make mistakes, and sometimes they're actually pretty big mistakes. But if you don't admit that you made them, and right away, the sooner that you admit them and the sooner you focus in on the solution versus being worried about the fact that you made the mistake, the better it's going to be. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I've had and hopefully overcome.
Yes. Own the mistake. Sometimes the ego is the toughest, elusive thing to get over. And that's very good advice. What advice would you have? Last question here. What advice do you have for a young entrepreneur, maybe graduating college or entering the business world, making what I call making the leap, jumping off of making the elusive entrepreneurial jump? What advice do you have?
So I was lucky enough to kind of stumble my way into this, and I believe today, because of the pace of change and particularly the impact that technology is having on society, there's going to be so much uncertainty and so much change in the next 5 years that the world needs experts. They need people to make sense of all this chaos and this madness. And the amount of effort and time that it takes to become an expert has shrunken down to where you can be an expert because there's a new technology may come out and it may reach 10 million, 100 million, 500 million users in a matter of weeks or months. And so there are not experts sitting around that know that technology. All it takes is just interacting with it, doing a bunch of Google searches, and you would be surprised that if you focus on a technology enough, that you can be in the top 99% of people who understand that and how it's applicable to the rest of the world. And so what I often see is that people don't realize that, and they miss opportunities to become an expert way before they ever thought they could. I mean, if you're 22 or 23, there's no reason why you couldn't be the world's foremost expert on or in the top 99% of a particular technology. We've got a young woman at our office now who is really leading up our AI effort. I bet she's 24, 25 years old. And there's a reason for her to be in every room. And it's because, frankly, she knows more about it than I do. And the only reason she was able to do that is because she wanted to. She was curious. She went out and figured it out on her own. She's passionate about it. And every night she's reading about it. She's staying on top of it. And so the advice I would give is that the idea of a timeline of having to put in years and years of effort before you're mature enough or you're well-versed enough to go in and command a room, that world doesn't exist today. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to stand out and be in a position of authority much sooner. So the thing I would say to any young person coming out right now is just make sure you pick something. Figure out something that you're passionate about and then be better at it than anybody else. And that sounds kind of challenging and hard, but a lot of people just don't put in that effort. And if you put in more effort than the guy next to you or the gal next to you, the likelihood of you being the leader inside your company or inside an organization is much higher, and it's going to put you on a path to success.
Ben Gaddis, president of T3, that was very, very good advice, and we appreciate you for coming on to Modern Business.
Thank you, Ron. I enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
By the way, I'm just curious to hear your feedback on this question. How are you looking at voice command and voice control and managing integrations with voice? Obviously, it's something I have an interest in terms of podcasting, but sure. I think voice is, we talked about AI, but I think voice is also super interesting.
Well, I think voice is interesting for a number of reasons, but as it relates to AI, I think voice democratizes AI. The voice is the tool that most of us will use to interact with AI in the most prevalent, but also probably the first way. You think about something like Siri or Alexa or Cortana.
Yeah.
So it is the interaction point, but voice will change our business. My prediction is that 70% of what we do as an agency today will be gone in the next 3 years because of voice. I mean, think about it. We're pushing pixels. We're creating things that people look at, they experience through sight, through touch, and most of it will be done through some sort of voice interaction. I mean, it's faster, it's more accurate, and it gets better every day. And we're probably a couple of percentage points away from voice clarity and fidelity. So, the ability for a machine to kind of understand. I think they say we're at like 96% accuracy rate. And you get up to 98, 99%. There's no reason to interact with anything in any other way. It's the most natural communication form. So, I think it's going to be a crazy transition point. And a lot of brands are really going to struggle because what they've known, think about logos and marks and shopper marketing and, visually pleasing and arresting creative, that goes away.
Isn't it crazy where we came, like literally 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you didn't have access to the world's information, and this little thing called the internet came along and you can go search anything out. But literally the whole fabric of all of that, I was raised kind of in this generation, in the internet generation, but the whole fabric of that is about to change, and the new interaction point is literally your spoken word. Like anything that saves time is obviously good, but my children will say, "What do you mean you used to type in and search something out?" That's crazy.
Yeah,
I find that fascinating.
They will. They won't recognize most of the query-based experiences that we have, and they just won't understand why we would ever even go that way. Because voice, is the first language exactly. So voice is the first language.
Why would you drive? That's so stupid. But you're right. Voice is the first thing you learn.